We look different today. Something's different. Have you changed your hair?
Ladies and gents, let's get into it. And welcome to the HODLNOTS Weekly Warm-Up. I'm John,
I'm Vicky.
and this is the news at 9 a.m. UTC, where it is currently on the hour somewhere in the world at your time. Let's get into some of the crypto headlines over the last couple of days. As you see, a slight change in our presentation today. We thought we'd smarten up. So let's get into these headlines. Bitcoin's bull market is not over, apparently, as it recovers back
Woohoo.
above 112,000. Bitcoin briefly surpassed 112,000 in a sign of recovery after a volatile week, prompting one analyst to say that the cryptocurrency was still in an uptrend. Oh, well, we don't dispute that. We'll be looking at the Bitcoin chart shortly. But Bitcoin has struggled to gain over the past week, as analysts have said investors were showing signs of exhaustion, with its sudden drop last week resulting in two major liquidation events across the wider crypto market. So one such analyst, XWin, said that two metrics showed that the cycle has not, however, reached its terminal stage, and added that the recent consolidation could mark the groundwork for the next major leg upward, suggesting that the bull market that is alive and well. All right, so ladies and gents, we will be looking at the Bitcoin chart and what all needs to happen in this week coming, actually. But for now, Vicky, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin. And for those of you who were on the happy hour hangout 2 times ago, I think we talked a lot about Bitcoin's decentralization risk. And interestingly enough, CoinGecko did a survey and they revealed about 29% of newcomers think there is a decentralization risk. So a new CoinGecko survey revealed a cautious divide in the community over Bitcoin's growing mainstream acceptance, as newcomers show the most skepticism. The poll, which was conducted between August 22 and September 11, 2025, gathered responses from about 2,500 participants. And it found while a majority lean positive, a significant minority remains wary of the Wall Street and traditional finance that may reshape the asset. Over 60% of all respondents said mainstream adoption, including developments such as spot ETFs, corporate treasuries holding Bitcoin, and government accumulation, is positive for Bitcoin. But within this group, 41.4% described the trend as very positive and cited greater legitimacy and long-term price potential, while 18.6% felt positive but expressed less enthusiasm. So another 19.4% of participants were neutral. However, 20.5 voiced concerns that Bitcoin's expansion into traditional finance could compromise its core principles. This group included 12.7% who see mainstream adoption as very negative. They warned the decentralization and censorship resistance may be weakened. So meanwhile, 7.8 were negative but strongly opposed. So lots of stats there, but it really is a conversation that needs to be had, like we had on the Happy Hour Hangout. Is all this mainstream adoption good for Bitcoin or not? So it's something that other people are talking about as well.
Absolutely. We've spoken about that BlackRock paradox, whether, these
Mm.
institutions buying up more and more Bitcoin, which is supposed to be decentralized, but they are centralized institutions. But more on that perhaps in October's Happy Hour Hangout, but we'll let you know
Mm.
more on that. But let's continue talking about Bitcoin because, ladies and gents, we have been speaking over the last couple of weeks and months actually around how many countries are starting to adopt Bitcoin, add it to their balance sheets, not only institutions, but countries as well. And we talk about various countries adding or looking to add a strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? So the title of this headline says nation state Bitcoin adoption to enter the suddenly phase very soon. Now, this is according to Samson Mao. So Samson Mao is the founder of Jan3, an institution, and he says Nation-state Bitcoin adoption now is at the tail end of the gradual stage, and it is entering the beginning phases of suddenly. So imagine this in terms of a chart. You'd have countries are getting to the this gradual stage of slowly adopting a Bitcoin, and the next phase in this chart is going to be the suddenly phase, this parabolic side of things. And we've spoken about this analogy before between the internet and the cryptocurrency adoption. And this is exactly what he's talking about. He says an increasing number of countries are preparing to ramp up Bitcoin adoption after moving past the initial skepticism phase. He says, I think we're on the tail end or gradually at the beginning phase of suddenly. This is what he said in a podcast on Saturday. He says, I think it is simply a matter of time before we see a massive run up and we see massive nation state FOMO, panic. And this, ladies and gents, as more and more countries are starting to realize the value in Bitcoin as a decentralized asset, and we start to see more countries either mining Bitcoin, acquiring Bitcoin, and these institutions doing the same, FOMO is going to kick in, aka panic, and we're going to see a very sudden global adoption of Bitcoin. Piggy, back to you.
Wouldn't that be fantastic? The next story that we have is actually a little follow-up from our happy hour hangout last week or 2 weeks ago, where we went over blockchains. So we went over the 10 most popular blockchains as far as usage. And Solana was number one at that stage, but it looks like BNB is catching up because BNB chain dethroned Solana in daily fees after an Aster DEX field surge. So BNB chain has overtaken Solana in daily chain fees and sustained the lead for 3 consecutive days. Now, fees, which are a key indicator of actual network usage, reveal a sharp reversal after Solana dominated mid-September with highs around 2.2 million compared to BNB chain's zero 0.6 or 0.8 million. So BNB chain is slowly gaining on Solana. So that's just an interesting follow-up from our happy hour hangout of the other day.
Absolutely. And just for those of you unfamiliar with Aster, decentralized exchange, the CZ, you'll remember the founder of Binance, he's confirmed that there were ex-Binance staff behind this decentralized exchange, Aster, in terms of its growth and adoption. So obviously they're taking a couple of pages from the Binance book, applying it, and this is why Aster has suddenly exploded. And this is also why the BNB chain, because they work with that, has outperformed Solana. Great news story there, Vicky. Thank you. We will be talking more about Aster in the near future as well. Now let's get back into some of the global adoptions, but nation states or nation states that are obsessed with crypto. So Singapore. So shout out to those in Singapore. I'm out in the Orient. Southeast Asia, as well as the UAE. Now, the UAE has been in our headlines a couple of times before as well, but Singapore and the UAE have emerged as the world's most crypto-focused or obsessed nations. So Singapore has topped the list with a composite score of 100. Nearly 1 in 4 residents, or 24.4% of the entire population, hold digital assets. The city-state also recorded the highest levels of online activity with roughly 2,000 crypto-related searches per 100,000 people. So for every 100,000 people, there are 2,000 odd searches. And that's a lot in terms of global population, and you look at ratios as well. The UAE scoring at 99.7, placing second overall, but first in ownership, with 25.3 of the entire population in the UAE holding crypto. This saw a 210% increase in adoption since 2019, which peaked in 2022, when more than a third of the residents reported exposure to digital assets. So at some point, a lot of them had a lot more. We know that regulations are starting to unfold there in the UAE, and a lot of other companies and institutions are moving to the UAE, but there is huge adoption over in the UAE, obviously Singapore as well. Let's talk about the US. Now, we know the US is a rather large country, but with its pro-crypto president and a lot of these other bills that have been passed, the US ranks in third at 98.5, supported by more than 30,000 crypto ATMs as well. So it's not just in terms of the search criteria as well as the number of wallets being held. But the fact is that the US has 30,000 crypto ATMs, 10 times greater than any other country, and a 220% rise in usage since 2019. So what's interesting is Canada up there as well. That's a 64.7. They are the fastest growth rate of any nation at 225%. So this is huge for Canada. So Canada, for most of you know, is north of the United States of America. They are fourth in terms of global exposure. However, they have got the fastest growth rate in comparison to any other nation. They're talking about 10% ownership of crypto assets, and they have about 3,500 ATMs. Now, we have spoken about Australia in the past, is up there in terms of the number of ATMs. And again, ladies and gents, having an ATM in your country, at least a crypto ATM, a Bitcoin ATM, is the fact is that it creates exposure and opportunity for its residents to participate in that. So it's not just search words. It's not just the number of wallets that have been, have exposure to digital assets, but it's also ATMs. In Germany, Switzerland, Argentina, and Indonesia are also up there in the top 10. So this is starting to grow globally as people realize that decentralized finance, such as Bitcoin and through the use of ATMs and be able to withdraw your funds, that and, whether countries are adopting it part of the strategic reserves and the national reserves is all huge for crypto and ties in with that of the story around that gradual phase going to go into that suddenly phase. So yeah, I think even by next week we might have a story on that again. So Vicky, back to you.
Can you imagine how the adoption would go in the US and Canada if they actually lifted the restrictions? Because,
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, there's so much adoption over there with all of the restrictions. People are just hungry for crypto. So let's cross our fingers that that happens soon. Now, in this next story, this is for everyone, and including myself. This is not a news story, but I was reminded of this over the weekend, and I thought it was important to bring it to our members because everyone that has a Ledger Nano S. So the Ledger Nano S are the little ones that look like USB sticks. Ledger is phasing out support for them. So they stopped selling Ledger Nano S's quite a while ago, but they have continued to support them. But they are stopping support soon. So Ledger's phasing out support for the Ledger Nano S, as future changes in blockchain networks might affect its compatibility and support features for things like blockchain updates and security enhancements. While the secret recovery phrase and funds will remain secure, Ledger recommends upgrading to a different hardware wallet to maximize self-custody experience. The main constraint of the Ledger Nano S is its available memory, rendering it unable to support most new use cases. In addition to the flash size constraints, the available RAM memory on the chip is significantly lower compared to newer products. So Ledger, for hardware wallets that support the newer features, they have like the Ledger Stacks, the Ledger Flex. There are other Ledger devices, and at the moment they are giving discounts to current Ledger current Ledger Nano S holders. So it is something to have a look at. Your funds will be secure. You're not going to lose your seed phrase or anything, but eventually you're not going to be able to transfer your crypto anymore. And I actually came across this. This is why it was important. And I had problems transferring a particular crypto. And because I used the Ledger Nano S, Ledger said, oops, can't use Ledger Live anymore. You're going to have to go to a third party, which worked. But really, I think I'm going to upgrade. So I wanted to mention that to everyone. Obviously, it is another charge. But if you do upgrade, don't forget it's the same wallet. So you have to get your seed phrase, you have to have your password. And when you create this new one, you have to use both to create the new one. So that's just something that you have to think about, shortly, I think.
Absolutely. Now, speaking about some of those assets you might be having in your cold wallets, some of the OGs and stuff, we've got some very exciting news. It's not our news, but it is news around ETFs. And I think you ladies and gents need to take some notes around this one particular. This is not financial advice, but October, otherwise, generally seen as Uptober, but October is ETF month as 16 crypto funds await the final decision. Right? We all should know what an ETF is by now. And that just means that people have access to trade the performance of certain crypto assets without necessarily owning them themselves. Obviously, every country is different in regulations. But hear this. Novadeus Wealth Management President Nate Geraci said it will be an enormous next few weeks for spot crypto ETFs as the SEC is due to decide on 16 different applications. The crypto industry could be set for a flood of new crypto exchange traded funds in October once the SEC makes a decision on these ETFs. The ETFs are connected to a variety of major altcoins, including Solana, XRP, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. You all know the meme coin Dogecoin, which have a final deadline scattered throughout October. Up for approval first is Decentralized Exchange Canary's Litecoin ETF with a deadline on October 2nd. That's this week, Thursday, followed by asset manager Grayscale's Solana and Litecoin trust conversion on October 10th, ending with WisdomTree's XRP fund on October 24th, according to a list of upcoming approvals created by Bloomberg's ETF analyst James Seyffert. The decision could happen any time before the final deadline. So while we've mentioned deadlines on these, those are deadlines. They could be approved before that. So we have mentioned a couple of these, and we will talk more about these other ETFs, especially for some of these altcoins, probably in this month's October's happy hour hangout. But keep an eye on those because as money comes in via the ETFs, we should see some performance by these altcoins. Exciting times. Vicky, over to you.
Yeah, and this next story fits right in with that because BlackRock has filed for another ETF, which is a Bitcoin Premium Income ETF. So BlackRock is expanding its Bitcoin lineup with a new income-focused exchange-traded fund, so ETF, beginning with a registration of the Delaware Trust Company tied to the vehicle. So the Bitcoin Premium Income ETF would generate returns by selling covered call options on Bitcoin futures, according to the ETF analyst Eric Balchunas. The structure offers steady payouts, but limits gains compared to BlackRock's flagship iShares Bitcoin ETF, which tracks Bitcoin directly. The product would most likely cater to investors prioritizing yield over exposure to Bitcoin's full upside. So as we mentioned, we talked about on the happy hour hangover, happy hour. Let me just stop there. How they now taken it apart and now they're actually going to be doing the futures. So definitely October is ETF month coming up.
Absolutely. So pretty much the entire thread and theme throughout these headlines, ladies and gents, is that global exposure to cryptocurrencies through the various mechanics and vehicles, as well as adoption, is very much on the rise. So you're in the right time at the right place. So exciting times. And that said, bear in mind that while Vicky will be mentioning the calls coming up as well, we do have a number of options for those of you who do not know how to read charts, do not how to trade, want to be able to do that for yourself, especially with this potential boom coming. Look out for our next live course as well as our self-paced courses, but we'll make mention of that more shortly. But let's have a look at what the Fear and Greed Index is telling us really, Vicky.
Yes, above my head. So the Fear and Greed Index was interesting because it hit a 5-month low over the weekend. And that fueled kind of a warning. Is this a warning or is this a buying opportunity? So again, those of you that have looked at the happy hour hangout, we talked about the Fear and Greed Index and what that means. And should you be fearful when everyone's greedy? And should you be greedy when everyone's fearful? Or should you follow the pack? So it has recovered from there. So it hit about 43 or actually 37 over the weekend. It's now back to 50, which is back to neutral. So could this be a signal that more pain is on the way, or is it just a corrective phase preceding a massive rally, like John was saying? So it has bounced back. It's neutral. Even though everyone was fearful over the weekend, everyone is being sensible again. So we're going to have to wait and see. And hopefully we will have that rally that we were talking about with all the ETFs and all the altcoins as well. So we're gonna have to watch this space. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah, Vicky said sometimes it pays off to be greedy when people are fearful, i.e., buy the dip. And if it did drop down to 37
Hmm.
over the weekend, in terms of that, that might be a signal, right? Returning back to neutral, I think the entire market is kind of waiting, Vicky, with bated breath because Bitcoin, as we mentioned in the very first headline for today, was that Bitcoin had regained $112,000, which is a good starting point. Now, again, for those of you who are watching this and maybe not sure what all these different things are in the charts, what we can just do that for a moment is these are all elements that make up the HODLNOTS indicator that helps teach us to understand what the trends are going to do, especially in terms of where Bitcoin might be going. So, I'm just going to give you some of my hillbilly analysis around what we see. So we did see a drop over obviously the end of last week. Well, it felt like a couple of weeks. But if we have a look at to some of these values using the HODL Fire indicator, and this is obviously on the day chart, ladies and gents, we did hit this low back here on the 1st of September. But while Bitcoin did drop, it didn't drop down as low, right? So the question was, is Bitcoin still in an uptrend? Well, look at this, ladies and gents. The fact is that if we did like a little bit of a zoom out, all right, and we can go back even more in time if you really like to. But if you start to look at this, what does the trend really look like to you? Hmm? All right. It looks fairly up and it's going to go up and then sideways, a little down and then up and a little sideways, a little down. But as global adoption, especially, I mean, we've hit all-time highs over the last while. It was amazing to see after breaking 107,000, which is previous high, and then 108. I mean, we had all of these back here. Look at this. This is just over a couple of months. And at the moment, while a lot of people are panicking because they see this big drop from, 117 down to 108, it's okay, ladies and gents. So in the next few days, it's looking at what Bitcoin might do. It is a matter of time frames as well. Everything available within our courses that we do teach. But one key thing just to note, we do need to break above 112,000, right? You guys, without even knowing necessarily what this all is, you know what these things seem to be getting in the way of the candles already going higher, right? So I'd like to start to see it by the next, well, it'll be great to see if it was today, but in the next 2 days or 3 days, I'd like to see Bitcoin reclaim, and I've said this for months actually, 114, 115 is quite key in terms of those levels where it needs to stay. But we have pointed out previously that there's some heavy resistance in and around this area here because Bitcoin all-time current high is 124,000 odd. But who knows with October coming, with BlackRock filing for that premium and the ETF, as well as a lot more countries adopting Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. It is good to see and will be good to see when Bitcoin gets back up here. And I've got a strong feeling that October will be October, and we're going to see not only Bitcoin flying high into new all-time high territory as well. Who knows? I can't give you guys price prediction. That's not what I do. I'm telling you what we see. So for the moment, ladies and gents, hold on to your hats. Bitcoin needs to break above 114 in the next couple of days for it to stabilize. We might see it rally back up around 116, 117. But in order for Bitcoin itself to continue surviving, it needs to break up beyond that. So I predict a little bit of a chopping market over the next day, 2 or 3. Just looking at that. Meanwhile, look at some of these altcoins that are running despite the fact. So that is great to see, and people who know how to scalp trade are doing exactly that. So we'll have a quick look at Bitcoin dominance because we've spoken about this before. Bitcoin dominance, quite simply, is how much of the crypto or how much of the cash flowing into the crypto market is going into Bitcoin. This kind of rally has been pretty good as of last week, which means that more money is flowing into Bitcoin and less so into the alts. Sure, everyone's like, oh, but John, we all scalp trade, hodl fire, we love the volatility of the alts, and I agree, but there's no point getting all excited about Bitcoin dominance coming down, meaning more money flowing into the alts, if Bitcoin itself is tanking. All right, it brings the entire market down. So we want to see cash flowing into Bitcoin through this, at least this metric, this chart. As I've said before, I wouldn't mind seeing it going back up to about 60%, meaning more money flows into Bitcoin at that time. Let it stabilize, let Bitcoin itself go sideways. Then this can come down and drop right out of its hiney. I don't mind. But in the meantime, as you can see, the market is a little bit sideways the last 2 days or so. I'm just trying to recover. So if you're unsure whether you should be trading or not, skill yourself up so that you can read your charts. You know that, all right, I can go look at certain altcoins like this. I might drop $100. I'm not going to drop my 100,000 like I would buy into Bitcoin or Ethereum or into Solana, whatever it is. But learn how to trade so you can actually make some money while the market is still deciding what it's doing. So we're keeping an eye on Bitcoin. Key levels there for me needs to break above 112, kind of settle around the 114,000. And then once Bitcoin is sideways and going up a little, then we'll be looking more pertinently at Bitcoin dominance, hoping then that it starts to drop if Bitcoin stays stable. So that's it for now in terms of just looking at Bitcoin, Vicky, as well as Bitcoin dominance.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll be talking about that in the lodge as well this week, where we do have a slightly different schedule. So the week kicks off whereby the self-paced course takers, everyone on there, will now start having their calls if they're busy with chapters 1 to 3 on Mondays at 12 p.m. UTC instead of Tuesdays. And the reason for that is we are moving our HODL Fire calls from Wednesdays to Tuesdays, and I'll get to that shortly. So we kicks off later today, actually, with the first of the self-paced calls at 12 p.m. UTC. And then the week will continue with Wendy's normal lodge training on Tuesday at 8 a.m. UTC, where our lodge members can jump on and ask questions. However, this week it will not be Wendy hosting, it will be Marcel. So always a great opportunity to hear another point of view on those calls. So if you can jump on and hear all about what Marcel has to say about scalp trading in general. So, and then as I mentioned, for those of you with a HODL Fire indicator subscription, hopefully you have all seen the schedule change for those calls because there is a schedule change as well. And the first of those new calls will be happening on Tuesday at 12 p.m. UTC. If you haven't viewed the new schedule, register for the call again, and the new times and days will be viewable there. So there's a new schedule. They will happen on Tuesdays, and the dates and times are there, so just make note of that. And then the week continues on Wednesday at 8 p.m. UTC with the first of our HODL dot calls for those of you who are taking the 3M challenge, and continues on Thursday with the second of our 3M challenge HODL dot calls on Thursday at 8 a.m. UTC, and that will be hosted by our very own I have no fingers. I am pointing at my comrade here. John will be hosting that this week. And after a very busy week, because as well on Thursday, we have our BTAF token call. So again, the months are flying by. BTAF token call is on Thursday at 9 a.m. UTC, right after that HODL dot call. And then lastly, on Thursday is the second of our weekly self-paced course calls at 12 p.m. UTC. And if I went through that too quickly, it's all in the Certified Academy on the lodge schedule and also in your back office at bitcointraderforecast.com if you have those subscriptions. So that is what's happening in the lodge this week. So slightly different schedule.
Absolutely. So, ladies and gents, we're getting into the section now, and because of this, we're gonna just quickly just shake things up a little. This is the second contest in which one can win the HODL Fire indicator for 30 days, and we have had 3 other letters. All right, I'm not going to mime them now. I'm not going to mention them necessarily. But we've had a couple of guesses. We had a couple of guesses in the lodge. We had a couple of guesses in the Q&A section down below. We've had 3 letters so far. Now, is it going to be a fourth for a 4-letter word, or are there 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9? So we're going to get into, I'm not going to mention what the previous 3 were, but what I am going to do is I'm going to quickly show you what the next letter, all right, the 4th letter out of all of them so far is. So let's see if I can get that right. All right, there we go.
There we go. You're
That
hired.
is.
I'm not going to do it anymore. John's hired. No, John, I have a IRL situation going on, and John has graciously empathized with me, and that's why we have avatars on. So he is taking over from that this week. Great Great letter formation, John. Thank you.
All right, it is very similar to one of the previous letters as well, so just bear that in
It
mind.
is.
So now you have four. I'm going back to my comfy little avatar. So you now have four. Okay, so bear that in mind. What word could it be? If you have any guesses, you'd like to drop them into the Q&A section now, you're more than welcome to do that. You've got about 30 seconds. Otherwise, drop it in our large tag Vicky or myself, and maybe you could be winning that HODL Fire if it is correct. All right, let's see
We actually
what comes.
have spelled a word already, so
I,
maybe
I do
someone will
I
get
do see that. I did I do
which
realize
I am
that.
in at the moment. So there we go.
All right,
How
fantastic.
apropos. Yes.
All
Okay.
right, on that
Um,
note, what is the weekly thought, Vicky?
well, the weekly thought this week is the more you weigh, the more difficult you are to kidnap. So stay safe, everyone, and eat cake.
The more you wear, the more difficult you are to kidnap. All right, fantastic, ladies and gents. Have a sweet week. Have a great week. We'll see you guys on a number of the calls throughout in the lodge and otherwise. Again, we'll see those who are on the self-paced call shortly. Watch out for the huddle fire calls. It's going to be a big, big week. And yeah, we're going to be going into October. One last announcement on Thursday at 9 a.m. UTC is the monthly BTF token AMA. So we'll be catching you guys on that. Until then, until next week, Monday again for this call. Ciao, ciao.
I'm waving. Goodbye.